This is Trevor Coppola for Anthony J. Hilder. I'm with Deborah Tavares, and we're going to discuss a few topics here.
Thank you so much for the interview. I appreciate the opportunity. One of the things that we want to talk about is what we were discussing a little bit ago, and that is the significance of this NASA war document that was found on the NASA website, and the need to urgently get this out in front of as many people as possible because of the content of this document.
So was this document available to everyone, or this was on their actual website and someone found it?
That is correct. It was on the NASA website, and it was a document that actually is a PowerPoint presentation by Dennis Bushnell, the chief NASA scientist at the Langley Center. And it was presented in 2001, July of 2001, just a few months before 9/11. And what brought my attention to it and immediately rang some uncomfortable realizations was when we first came across it. It says on the website, Future Strategic Issues, Future Warfare circa 2025. And as I decided to just flip through it quickly to see what it was about, I was a little stunned on page 4. It said, the presentation is based in all cases upon existing data, trends, analysis technologies, no pixie dust. And the entire premise of the document, or the PowerPoint, is about robots, cyborgs, and humans. So I immediately saw a conflict between future and now. And I thought, what are they covering up? Because that was a definite cover-up. And then I started to continue looking through the document with shock. And that's why we're talking right now, because I think most people would be shocked to find on page 93.
So who wrote this NASA document, and was this intentional? Did they want the public to see this, do you think? Or?
Well, again, the Illuminati, the most wealthy, rich men on the face of the planet, always telegraph everything that they're going to do. So the fact that it was on the NASA website, it was certainly available to the public, but did they see it? Obviously not. Because had they looked at this document, you would know about it right now, and we don't. And that's the purpose of this discussion, is for people to know about this document. Again, the conflict between the future and the fact that they said it was a current reality in 2001 of July when this was actually presented. And what it said, which was quite shocking, on page 93, it said, capture, torture Americans in living color on prime time. And that is an unbelievable statement. Then it's followed up by saying terror attacks within the continental United States using binary biologicals take down critical infrastructure. They are going to use an EMP, which is an electromagnetic pulse. They're going to use radiation frequencies against our brains, etc., and conduct serious psy-war and collateral damage and exploitation. On this same page 93, they say exploit CNN syndrome. Now, CNN, of course, is the network, the news media network, propaganda machine, and was set up by the CIA. You can watch the movie called Psy-War on stopthecrime.net for all the background information on CNN. Very, very interesting information. Then you go on and you read that on page 66, they say increasingly critical are human limitations and human downsides. Humans are too large, humans are too heavy, too tender, humans are too slow, both physically and mentally, and we require huge logistical trains, meaning we cost way too much money to maintain, and humans have rapidly decreasing to negative value. Can you even believe this? I mean, you're hearing this, and it's got to be rather shocking coming off of a NASA website, particularly when some of the agencies that are involved are the U.S. Air Force, DARPA, the CIA, the FBI, Southern Command, Atlantic Command, Australian Department of Defense, and other agencies. This is the corporation's agencies. We are USA Inc. We're no longer under a constitution as proclaimed in the Iron Mountain Report, which everyone should read. On stopthecrime.net, you can download it not only as the document, but you can watch the documentary, which I highly recommend. You will see how the stealth and deceptive, incrementally positioned attacks upon the Constitution have rendered us now a corporation. And we no longer have a legitimate government. We are being controlled by corporations and banks that are posing as a legitimate government, and they're not. We wouldn't have a legitimate government with the war machine stating what they were going to do on the continental United States to all the people. And this is not just in the United States. This is a global planned attack and assault with technologies beyond most people's comprehension. Everyone is buying books and ammunition, guns and ammunition, and they don't realize that the beam weapons, for example, on page 45, beam weapons increasingly prevalent. This is how they're going to attack. They talk also about, on page 9, this is very interesting and horrifying. Humans have taken over and vastly shortened evolution. They're going to direct evolution. They believe, the bankers, the global elites, believe that they have accomplished immortality. And they're doing that, again, keeping in mind that this entire document is about robots, cyborgs, and humans. They've already mapped our brains. We've just recently heard that they can transfer a human brain into machinery. So whenever they tell us that this is a new scientific discovery, we know it's been decades and decades prior to us ever finding out about these things. And they also talk about microdust as a weapon. They say that this micron-sized mechanized dust, which is distributed as an aerosol and inhaled into the lungs, the dust mechanically bores into the lung tissue and executes various pathological missions. They say it's a completely new type of warfare, and it is legal. It's legal. This is what they're going to do to all the humans on the face of this planet. It's all legal. And then they talk about how the use of frequencies will be used in warfare. And we know, for example, the smart meters that are being deployed around the globe, the replacement of our electric meters, which will also and does include the replacement of all of our gas meters and our water meters as well, and will be connected to our food supply when they collapse the currency and they issue energy allowances, and that will all be controlled through the metering system. But they talk about the use of low frequencies, microwave frequencies, and they mention in this NASA document the U.S. Army report. The U.S. Army report is on our website, smartmetersmurder.com. It's about a 20-page Army document that talks about the use of frequencies to target the enemy. We're the enemy. And they say 100% of the human population will be affected by these frequencies. Some will be the canaries in the coal mine, which is a term that they've been using as people have been dropping like flies. People are experiencing all kinds of health maladies. Generally, it starts with ringing of the ears, heart palpitations, skin rashes, inability to sleep through the night. And what they're doing is they're jamming our immune systems with these frequencies.
So how do the elite shield themselves from their own weapons?
Well, that's a really good question. And some of the information that we've come across is, of course, they have methods far ahead of anything that we have available to ourselves, such as cancer cures. They don't get cancer. There's chip mechanisms that we understand can fend off certain frequency attacks. We also know that they're interested in transhumanism. So much of what they're doing globally, they're interested in. And to what extent they're affected by all of the chemtrails and all of the nanofibers that are being dropped, which is phase 1 of the first protocol. It all lines up. Everything lines up. You connect the dots. You see the NASA war document. Not only does it talk about the effects of frequencies and how it will be used, they acknowledge that it will interfere with our performance, that it will cause seizures. They acknowledge this in this document. It is no longer a debate about smart meters. We don't need any more scientists or doctors saying people are getting sick. This is the intention. So we have to stop looking for more verifiable proof that people are becoming sick. This is the goal. This is the absolute goal. It's incarceration, it is enslavement, and it is depopulation, and it is massive mind control. The frequencies have multiple purposes.
What do you think the solution is to all of this multi-level attack that's been going on for a very long time?
Well, I think the solution is that people need to become educated as rapidly as possible. And there are documents that are, for example, the Silent Weapons Quiet Wars document. It's a 41-page document. It's on our website. This lays out, it's an operations, research, and technical manual. This document was the 1954 a 1954 Bilderberg policy at the first Bilderberg meeting. And this laid out the strategy to control the human population. And again, I can't stress enough that everyone should read this, because they talk about how they talk about that this document should not be released to the people because it is a declaration of war.
You can't keep fighting fires. You have to go after the arsonists. And that's what you're pointing out, is the people that are responsible. And everything we see out there, what they're spraying and why are they spraying, nobody's talking about the conspiracy itself. This is a war against the people, and this, you've got a hold of those specific people, and that's why that's valuable. They're killing us.
That's exactly right. And this is their war plan. This is the war plan. So we have to go to the war plan. This is only 41 pages. You take out the diagrams and you've got 36 pages. And it's not hard to read. They say that it's the silent weapon technology has evolved from operations research, a strategic and tactical developed under the military management in England during World War II. The original purpose of this research was to study strategic and tactical problems of air and land defense with objective effectiveness used in initiated military resources against foreign enemies. And they go on to talk about how they came across technologies that they had. Oh, in 1952, the grant period terminated and the high-level meeting of the elite was held to determine the next phase of the social operations research. The Harvard project had been very fruitful, as is borne out by the publication of some of the results in 1953, suggesting the feasibility of economic engineering, studies of structure of the American economy. And they talk about how it was engineered in the last half of the 1940s. The new, quiet war machine stood, so to speak, in sparkling gold-plated hardware on the showroom floor by 1954. So this document talks about a combination of irresistible attacks upon humanity and how they will control humanity. Politically, they talk about how they set up the political system, right and left, so that we would feel our grievances were aired and our frustrations could come out. But the bankers were behind everyone who was elected, and they laugh at us. They laugh at us. The very, very last, and I'll go to this right now because we'll come back to the document itself, but the very last statement in this document, it says, Factor 6, cattle. Those who will not use their brains are no better off than those who have no brains. And so this mindless school of jellyfish, father, mother, son, and daughter, become useful beasts of burden, or trainers of the same. So what they say in this document is they will dole out poisonous foods. It's not what we need, but it's what we want, and those that decide to eat these foods will have the consequences of that. They tell us how they set up all the social engineering, how they devise the family, how they crumble the family, how they set up the war machine, how they influence thinking in the family unit to allow the family to give up their children to war for a rich man's fodder. It's a document that discusses the artificial womb. They believe that people need to feel protected and that the elites are going to serve as the womb for protection of the people, that they'll have a place to take cover and hide from the reality of life because we just are not capable of managing the reality of life. So they will set up that artificial womb. It says, the objective of these artificial wombs is to provide a stable environment for both stable and unstable activity, to provide a shelter for the evolutionary process of growth and maturity, survival, to provide security for freedom, and to provide defensive protection for offensive activity. And they say that from the time a person leaves its mother's womb, in every effort is directed towards building, maintaining, and withdrawing into artificial wombs various sorts of substitute protective devices or shells. So they set themselves up to protect us, to keep us crippled, to numb us down with foods so that our pineal gland is interfered with. We're never able to reach our higher consciousness. And right now, the massive fluoridation across the United States is to collapse the ability for us to think. They're shutting us down right now.
They take your baby and make it Rosemary's Baby.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
It's very similar to The Matrix, which was based on a DARPA document. I mean, it is similar, isn't it? It's problem, reaction, solution, the same way they always operate. So I guess the best thing to do is wake everyone up and hope that a grassroots movement can change it. Do you think revolution would be necessary at some point, or could it change without that? What do you think?
Well, I think we need a revelation, not a revolution. A revolution would only bring in martial law, in the opinion of what we are looking at, would bring in martial law. It would also allow people to be targeted with the weaponry that they cannot wait to roll out on us. You add the drones, you add the microdust, you add in the beam weapons that they tell us they have. They also have a blast wave accelerator. And when you look at the population of the United States, the majority of the population lives along the coastlines. And the blast wave accelerator was a tidal wave invention that the United States dreamt up with the Soviet Union back in the 40s. Actually, it was going to be used in World War II instead of the bombs, but they decided to use the bombs instead. And the blast wave accelerator exploits the methane deposits on the seabed and causes a fingerprintless, plumeless tidal wave on low-lying areas around the perimeter of any country that
Right
they
now,
just.
you've got your weaponized Gestapo meter that keeps track of every house and every movement and every bit of energy that you're already doing and can report back to whoever is observing. So we're virtually in a concentration camp right now.
Yes,
In the
we are.
meantime, the food supplies are being reduced, as you're mentioning in your other interview, how the dams are being taken out and the food. I mean, it's so obvious that the federal government coming in and wanting your child even at earlier and earlier ages, every place, everywhere, and it's based on the foundation of climate change, which you mentioned. You might want to get into that and your Iron Mountain.
Absolutely true. All the documents, the Iron Mountain document, even the NASA war document, talks about there are too many people using too much stuff, and the Earth cannot support this. And they've come up with the fear-based scientific fraudulent information that people are now accepting. They're rewriting history and they're rewriting science with the idea that people are using too much resources. We have to reduce CO2 and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And that is flying through every city across the world right now. It's written into all local government documents, and cities now are, well, California, for example, with the CARB initiative, where we have to actually pay for the air we breathe, and we're taxed for the air. It's like the fiat money. We've accepted false-backed money, which they tell us in the Iron document, or in the silent weapons document, one of the reasons that they send our men and women off to war is to reduce the population because they have stolen from them. They've taken real labor service in exchange for illegitimate false fiat money. So they have to eliminate the creditors. That's another aspect of war, is to reduce the creditors. But it's all based on the false pollution that is not false. They've created the pollution. When you look at the Iron Mountain document, you will see the methods in which they were going to create pollution. They even say that they will deforest us, and they're doing that with the chemtrail, the secret chemtrail or geoengineering program or weather modification. Actually, that program has multiple layers. Not only does it increase weather events, we've just experienced some horrific events here in the United States with massive tornadoes that just destroyed a number of cities in Oklahoma. We're being hit globally. They're hitting our food supply. It does reduce our food supply. It will increase the cost of our food. It's changing the pH in the soil, which will then fit to the prescribed Monsanto mega corporation food takeover of the globe. That is the intention of Monsanto, is global food domination. They have the seeds. The seeds will grow in the polluted soil that they are creating. This is all by design. So what do we do about this, you asked? We first must become educated. And I would say that the quickest way for people to become educated is look at these very simple source documents. Look at the Quiet Weapons Silent War document. Look at the Iron Mountain document and the New World Order Exposed 1969. They're all on our website, stopthecrime.net. Of all the research we have done, if you just get those basic documents understood, if everyone understands the fraud, then we will be able to eliminate this. We don't have to go on with this fraud. We do not. And people keep saying, well, there's more of us than them. Well, that may be true. But sadly, now, there are technologies that are so unbelievable that people won't even realize what hit them. And that is the strategy of the future wars and the wars that we're facing in our country. But I would say everyone needs to look at the NASA document. You need to move from the illusion, the non-reality that you are living in. You need to move into a new reality formed by the truths that these documents convey. So that then from those realities, then you can look at solutions. You can't shoot from the hip and look for solutions if you have not learned who's doing this to us, how they're doing this to us, and the documents that tell us how they are doing this to us.
Like the Truman Show, which was designed to create a false reality for entertainment, the false reality we have now is designed to kill us. This is a war against the people. This is why that tabloid came out, Prepare to Die. And they're doing it in so many deliberate ways in which those documents show that it's been in the works for a long time. And you not only see the individuals, which can be kind of identified with the Bilderbergers, the Trilats, and Skull and Bones. They are in the saddle. They are the ones determining policy, the scientific advisor to the president of the John P. Holdren in charge of the chemtrails. We have MITRE with the former head of the CIA directing all these branches of government. We've got guys like Leon Panetta, which is the head of the CIA and the Department of Defense, moving our armies over to NATO and moving without a constitution. This is a direct war against us, and we see people dying like flies now. And like you said, it doesn't have fingerprints on it because of the methods that they're using, but it's as real as people getting strokes and cancer and autism and Alzheimer's. It's so clear. I mean, the stats, the mathematics prove the point. And so they have to know, people have to know what's going on and to strategize to fight it. And they can, because the only way they're getting away with this is by the lies. And if you sort of come to the mass media, the three networks, and the two wire services, you're never going to get out of it.
Well, it actually says in the document, in the NASA War document, that they will use mass media propaganda. That is prevalent.
CNN syndrome, is that?
Yeah, that's one of the things that they call it, but they're literally going through this document. Oh, they're going to also use explosive dust opportunities. They talk about how, the dust will infiltrate deeply into buried and other such targets. They're saying in here too, if you move, they can see you and you're dead. So the technology, sensors in everything. There is an amazing mission statement that I found on PSI technology out of the Carnegie Mellon Institute. And the mission statement stated that they were changing the global infrastructure to that of computers and technology, and that would include our entire structure, not only utilities, but civil, government policies. And what is also very interesting, we went to Al Gore's recent book review. He wrote a book called The Future, and he talks about how artificial intelligence is going to take over, and that we're going to see changes within the United States that have not been seen in 500 years. And he talks about how it's just not efficient to continue with humans. The same thing. These all tie in. They all tie in. We have a think tank that is plotting and scheming against humanity because they believe that it's too frail. And they also talk about let me pause for a second here. Oh, they talk about the U.S. Brain Project, and it begun in the 90s. They say that it was funded by 16 organizations across 5 agencies. NIH, which of course is the National Health Institute, the Department of Defense, NASA, and the Department of Energy. And they talk about how they have over 10,000 individual presentations at annual meetings for the Society for Neuroscience. And essentially, they have redesigned humanity. And there is a fascinating life story of a 4th generation clone called Michael Prince. And that is on our website under the NASA document link, and I urge everybody to listen to this interview with Michael Prince. He was killed in 2011. and he is a fourth-generation clone. The levels of technology, the length of time that they've had technologies are unbelievable. What they also say in the Iron Mountain documentary is that they will control the educational system, that they will replace the education system with computers. They're saying that in the NASA document too. Everything will be telecommuting, teleshopping, teleentertainment, teletravel, teleeducation. This way they can rewrite history. Everything will be on Kindle, and it'll be very easy to change books, to change the language. Recently I was listening to a weather report, and the reporter said it will be sunny tomorrow. But I'm calling sunshine now a soft sunshine, because the sun doesn't shine like it used to. I mean, that is what I'm saying. The reporter didn't say that. But the reporter now is saying a soft sunshine. They're rewriting our definition of what a sunny day is supposed to look like, because we're under the constant vellum of this secret, non-existent atmospheric poisoning of our skies. So they're rewriting our vocabulary. They're rewriting everything about us. And they're keeping us so sick from the fluoride, from the aspartame in the food, all of the dyes and chemicals on everything. I mean, even the receipts that we get from filling our cars with gas are poisonous. We shouldn't be touching them. And so we need to navigate. I say that life on a daily basis is like trying to walk through a landmine field. And if you get to the other side at the end of the day, you've made good choices, because they've certainly put and placed landmines in our lives.
Yeah, it's hard to avoid, really. I mean,
The impact that it's having on our lives, that we should be sitting here right now having this conversation because of what has been orchestrated against us. Our futures are being determined for us. Our lifespans are being decided upon.
it's fascinating information. So the best way to get access to all this is stopthecrime.net.
StopTheCrime.net. It links to our other websites as well, which is smartmetersmurder.com. We have invaluable YouTube videos up on smartmetersmurder.com. There's a series done by Barry, B-A-R-R-I-E, Trower, T-R-O-W-E-R, who is a scientist out of the UK, and talks about the weaponization of frequencies as it relates specifically to the wireless, and in particular the vast deployment throughout America and other countries as well of the cell phone towers. They're erupting everywhere, and they're disguising them as trees, they're disguising them in church steeples. Even when you drive through the desert, they're disguised into yuccas, and that is a cell phone tower. They're also, this is very interesting, they're putting them in mobile oil signs in gas stations, so you don't even see them. Now, when you look, if you're really aware of spotting cell phone towers, my grandchildren can spot them a mile away. But you can go to shopping centers where they have landscaping and the uplights amongst the landscaping, and you'll see many uplight standards that are disguised cell phone towers. And you don't think of it. You're just thinking that it's lights within the parking lot, and they're actual cell phone towers.
And they're in church steeples as well,
Church
aren't
steeples.
they? Yeah.
Yes, they are. And they're paying schools to put them on their campuses. Right now, there's a newly discovered cancer cluster at San Diego State University, and there have been a number of students and faculty that have gotten brain tumors. So we are in a takedown of frequencies admitted by this document. We have the proof, we have the military, the agencies that admit to this. We don't need to prove the deaths on the campuses near towers, because it says towers will be used on page 98. It says that towers will be used to emit frequencies. So again, this is their document. This is what they tell us on page 98. A typical scenario: takedown of the U.S. by 10 people and $10 million. Binary biologicals, imported vitamins and clothing, the food supply will be poisoned, terror attacks with vaccines and with viruses. They talk about our railroads will be attacked, selective anti-personnel with radiation frequencies, microwaves from the towers. The water supply will be contaminated via intercontinental unmanned vehicles, accompanied by serious psy-war, and that's the CNN syndrome. So they're telling us here how easy it would be to take down the United States with these new technologies. We've got to expose this.
Thanks so much for all this information, Deborah Tavares, and we will check out your website and try to make this go viral and get it out there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Recently, there's been this video going around on the net called USA Inc. Depopulation and You with Deborah Tavares. And I think she has this site, stopthecrime.net, or she refers to it anyway. And she talks about in this video a document called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. I came over here to read this document and found it quite interesting. So I'm going to go through the whole document here in this video. The original video I'll put links to, the US Inc. Depopulation, and I want to thank Ashley Law for referring that video to me. It's very disturbing, and this document is very disturbing as well. So I will include links to this and to the actual video, and it takes a little while to get through. It's 44 pages long, but there's also a lot of technical pages in here that I'm just going to scroll past, and if you care to read them, help yourself, pause the video to read those technical parts of it. But thank you very much for listening, and hopefully you can get all the way through it. Forward. This manuscript was delivered to our offices by an unknown person. We did not steal the document, nor are we involved with any theft from the United States government, and we did not get the document by way of any dishonest methods. We feel that we are not endangering the national security by reproducing this document. Quite the contrary, it has been authenticated, and we feel that we are not only within our rights to publish it, but morally bound to do so. Regarding the training manual, you may have detected that we had to block out the marginal notes by the selectee at the CIA Training Center, but I can assure you that the manual is authentic and was printed for the purpose of introducing the selectee to the conspiracy. It has been authenticated by 4 different technical writers for military intelligence. One just recently retired who wants very much to have this manual distributed throughout the world, and one who is still employed as an electronics engineer by the federal government and has access to the entire series of training manuals. One was stationed in Hawaii and held the highest security clearance in the naval intelligence, and another who is now teaching at a university and has been working with the Central Intelligence Agency for a number of years and wants out before the axe falls on the conspirators. We believe that the entire world should know about this plan, so we distributed internationally 100 of these manuscripts to ask individuals at top-level positions their opinions. The consensus opinion was to distribute this to as many people as who wanted it, and to the end that they would not only understand that war had been declared against them, but would be able to properly identify the true enemy to humanity. Conspiracy theories are nothing new to history. Plots to kill Caesar and overthrow Rome abounded, for instance. However, it is seldom that concrete clues to such plots come to light and are generally known. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, an introduction programming manual, was uncovered quite by accident on July 7, 1986, when an employee of a Boeing aircraft company purchased a surplus IBM copier for scrap parts at a sale and discovered inside details of a plan hatched in the embryonic days of the Cold War, which called for control of the masses through manipulation of industry, peoples, pastimes, education, and political leanings. It called for a quiet revolution, putting brother against brother and diverting the public's attention from what is really going on. The document you are about to read is real. It is reprinted in its virgin form with diagrams as a touch of reality. Top secret. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars Operations Research Technical Manual TM-SW7905.1. Welcome aboard. This publication marks the 25th anniversary of the Third World War, called the Quiet War, being conducted using subjective biological warfare fought with silent weapons. This book contains an introductory description of this war, its strategies, and its weaponry. May 1979, number 74-1120. Security. It is patently impossible to discuss social engineering or the automation of a society, i.e. the engineering of a social automation system's silence weapons on a national or worldwide scale without implying extensive objectives of social control and destruction of human life, i.e. slavery and genocide. This manual is in itself an analog declaration of intent. Such a writing must be secured from public scrutiny, otherwise it might be recognized as a technically formal declaration of domestic war. Furthermore, when any person or group of persons in a position of great power and without full knowledge and consent of the public uses such knowledge and methodologies for economic conquest, it must be understood that a state of domestic warfare exists between said person or group of persons and the public. The solution of today's problems requires an approach which is ruthlessly candid, with no agonizing over religious, moral, or cultural values. You have qualified for this project because of your ability to look at human society with cold objectivity and yet analyze and discuss your observations and conclusions with others of similar intellectual capacity without the loss of discretion or humility. Such virtues are exercised in your own best interest. Do not deviate from them. Historical introduction. Silent weapon technology has evolved from operational research, a strategic and tactical methodology developed under the military management in England during World War II. The original purpose of operations research was to study the strategic and tactical problems of air and land defense with the objective of effective use of limited military resources against foreign enemies, i.e. logistics. It was soon recognized by those in positions of power that the same methods might be useful for totally controlling a society, but better tools were necessary. Social engineering, the analysis and automation of a society, requires the correlation of great amounts of constantly changing economic information, or data, so a high-speed computerized data processing system was necessary, which could race ahead of the society and predict when society would arrive for capitulation. Relay computers were too slow, but the electronic computer invented in 1946 by J. Presper Eckert and John W. Malky filled the bill. The next breakthrough was the development of the simplex method of linear programming in 1947 by the mathematician George B. Dantzig. Then in 1948, the transistor, invented by J. Bardeen, W. H. Brayton, and W. Shockley, promised great expansion of the computer field by reducing space and power requirements. With these three inventions under their direction, those in positions of power strongly suspected that it was possible for them to control the whole world with the push of a button. Immediately, the Rockefeller Foundation got in on the ground floor by making a 4-year grant to Harvard College, funding the Harvard Economic Research Project for the study of the structure of the American economy. 1 year later, in 1949, the United States Air Force joined in. In 1952, the grant period terminated, and a high-level meeting of the elite was held to determine the next phase of social operations research. The Harvard Project had been very fruitful, as is borne out by the publication of some of its results in 1953, suggesting the feasibility of economic social engineering. Studies in the Structure of the American Economy, copyright 1953 by Wassily Leontief, International Science Press, Inc., White Plains, New York. Engineered in the last half of the decade of the 1940s, the new quiet war machine stood, so to speak, in sparkling gold-plated hardware on the showroom floor by 1954. With the creation of the maser in 1954, the promise of unlocking unlimited sources of fusion atomic energy from the heavy hydrogen and seawater and the consequent availability of unlimited social power was a possibility only decades away. The combination was irresistible. The Quiet War was quietly declared by the international elite at a meeting held in 1954. Although the silent weapon system was nearly exposed 13 years later, the evolution of the new weapon system has never suffered any major setbacks. This volume marks the 25th anniversary of the beginning of the Quiet War. Already this domestic war has had as many victories on many fronts throughout the world. Political introduction. In 1954, it was well recognized by those in positions of authority that it was only a matter of time, only a few decades, before the general public would be able to grasp and upset the cradle of power. For the very elements on the new silent weapon technology were as accessible for a public utopia as they were for providing a private utopia. The issue of primary concern, that of dominance, revolved around the subject of energy sciences. Energy. Energy is recognized as the key to all activity on Earth. Natural science is the study of the sources and control of natural energy, and social science, theoretically expressed as economics, is the study of the sources and control of social energy. Both are bookkeeping systems, mathematics. Therefore, mathematics is the primary energy science, and the bookkeeper can be king if the public can be kept ignorant of the methodology of the bookkeeping. All science is merely a means to an end. The means is knowledge, the end is control. Beyond this remains only one issue: who will be the beneficiary? In 1954, this was the issue of primary concern. Although the so-called moral issues were raised in view of the law of natural selection, it was agreed that a nation or world of people who will not use their intelligence are no better than animals who do not have intelligence. Such people are beasts of burden and stakes on the table by choice and consent. Consequently, in the interest of future world order, peace, and tranquility, it was decided to privately wage a quiet war against the American public with an ultimate objective of permanently shifting the natural and social energy, wealth of the undisciplined and irresponsible many into the hands of the self-disciplined, responsible, and worthy few. In order to implement this objective, it was necessary to create, secure, and apply new weapons which, as it turned out, were a class of weapons so subtle and sophisticated in their principle of operation and public appearance as to earn for themselves the name silent weapons. In conclusion, the objective of economic research as conducted by the magnates of capital, banking, and the industries of commodities or goods and services is the establishment of an economy which is totally predictable and manipulatable. In order to achieve a totally predictable economy, the low-class elements of society must be brought under total control. Example, they must be housebroken, trained, and assigned a yoke, a long-term social duty from a very early age, before they have an opportunity to question the propriety of the matter. In order to achieve such conformity, the lower-class family unit must be disintegrated by a process of increasing preoccupation of the parents and the establishment of government-operated daycare centers for the occupationally orphaned children. The quality of education given to the lower class must be of the poorest sort, so that the mode of ignorance isolating the inferior class from the superior class is and remains incomprehensible to the inferior class. With such an initial handicap, even bright lower class individuals have little, if any, hope of extricating themselves from their assigned lot in this life. This form of slavery is essential to maintain some measure of social order, peace, and tranquility for the ruling upper class. Descriptive introduction of the silent weapon. Everything that is expected from an ordinary weapon is expected from a silent weapon by its creators, but only in its own manner of functioning. It shoots situations instead of bullets, propelled by data processing instead of chemical reaction or explosion, originating from bits of data instead of grains of gunpowder from a computer instead of a gun, operated by a computer programmer instead of a marksman, under the orders of a banking magnate instead of a military general. It makes no obvious explosive noises, causes no obvious physical or mental injuries, and does not obviously interfere with anyone's daily social life, yet it makes an unmistakable noise, causes unmistakable physical and mental damage, and unmistakably interferes with the daily social life. Example, unmistakable to a trained observer, that is, one who knows what to look for. The public cannot comprehend this weapon, and therefore cannot believe that they are being attacked and subdued by a weapon. The public might instinctively feel that something is wrong, but that is because of the technical nature of the silent weapon. They cannot express their feelings in a rational way or handle the problem with intelligence. Therefore, they don't know how to cry for help and don't know how to associate with others to defend themselves against it. When a silent weapon is applied gradually, the public adjusts or adapts to its presence and learns to tolerate its encroachment on their lives until the pressure, psychologically via economic, becomes too great and they crack up. Therefore, the silent weapon is a type of biological warfare. It attacks the vitality, options, and mobility of the individuals of society by knowing, understanding, manipulating, and attacking their sources of natural and social energy and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. Theoretical introduction. Give me control over a nation's currency and I care not who makes its laws. Mayor Amschel Rothschild, 1743 to 1812. Today's silent weapons technology is an outgrowth of a simple idea discovered, succinctly expressed, and effectively applied by the quoted Mr. Mayor Amschel Rothschild. Mr. Rothschild discovered the missing passive component of economic theory known as economic inductance. He, of course, did not think of his discovery in these 20th century terms, and to be sure, mathematical analysis had to wait for the Second Industrial Revolution. The rise of the theory of mechanics and electronics, and finally the invention of the electronic computer before it could be effectively applied in the control of world economy. General energy concepts. In the study of energy systems, there always appears three elementary concepts. These are potential energy, kinetic energy, and energy dissipation. And corresponding to these concepts, there are three idealized, essentially pure physical counterparts called passive components. In the science of physical mechanics, the phenomenon of potential energy is associated with a physical property called elasticity or stiffness and can be represented by a stretched spring. In electronic science, potential energy is stored in a capacitor instead of a spring. This property is called capacitance instead of elasticity or stiffness. In the science of physical mechanics, the phenomenon of kinetic energy is associated with a physical property called inertia or mass and can be represented by a mass or flywheel in motion. In electronic science, kinetic energy is stored in an inductor in a magnetic field instead of a mass. This property is called inductance instead of inertia. In the science of physical mechanics, the phenomenon of energy dissipation is associated with a physical property called friction or resistance and can be represented by a dashpot or other device which converts energy into heat. In electronic science, dissipation of energy is performed by an element called either a resistor or a conductor. The term resistor being the one generally used to describe a more ideal device, example wire, employed to convey electronic energy efficiently from one location to another. The property of a resistance or conductor is measured as either resistance or conductance reciprocals. In economics, these three energy concepts are associated with economic capacitance would equal capital, money, stock, inventory, investments in buildings and durables. Economic conductance would be goods, production flow coefficients. Economic inductance would be services, the influence of the population of industry on output. All of the mathematical theory developed in the study of one energy system, mechanics, electronics, can be immediately applied in the study of other energy systems. Mr. Rothschild's energy discovery. What Mr. Rothschild had discovered was the basic principle of power, influence, and control over people as applied to economics. That principle is, when you assume the appearance of power, people soon give it to you. Mr. Rothschild had discovered that currency or deposit loan accounts had the required appearance of power that could be used to induce people, inductance with people corresponding to a magnetic field, into surrendering their real wealth in exchange for a promise of greater wealth instead of real compensation. They would put up real collateral in exchange for a loan of promissory notes. Mr. Rothschild found that he could issue more notes than he had backing for, so long as he had someone's stock of gold as a persuader to show his customers. Mr. Rothschild loaned his promissory notes to individual and governments. These would create overconfidence. Then he would make money scarce, tighten control of the system, and collect the collateral through the obligation of contracts. The cycle was then repeated. These pressures could be used to ignite a war. Then he would control the availability of currency to determine who would win the war. That government which agreed to give him control of its economic system got his support. Collection of debts was guaranteed by economic aid to the enemy of the debtor. The profit derived from this economic methodology made Mr. Rothschild all the more able to expand his wealth. He found that the public greed would allow currency to be printed by government order beyond the limits of inflation of backing in precious metal or the production of goods and services. Apparent capital as paper inductor. In this structure, credit presented as a pure element called currency has the appearance of capital, but is in effect negative capital. Hence, it has the appearance of service, but is in fact indebtedness or debt. It is therefore an economic inductance instead of an economic capacitance, and if balanced in no other way will be balanced by the negation of population, war, or genocide. The total goods and services represent real capital called the gross national product, and currency may be printed up to this level and still represent economic capacitance. But currency printed beyond this level is subtractive, represents the introduction of economic inductance, and constitutes notes of indebtedness. War is therefore the balancing of the system by killing the true creditors, the public, which we have taught to exchange true value for inflated currency, and falling back on whatever is left of the resources of nature and regeneration of those resources. Mr. Rothschild had discovered that currency gave him the power to rearrange the economic structure to his own advantage, to shift economic inductance to those economic positions which would encourage the greatest economic instability and oscillation. The final key to economic control had to wait until there was sufficient data and high-speed computing equipment to keep close watch on the economic oscillations created by the price shocking and excess paper energy credits, paper inductance, and inflation. Breakthrough. The aviation field provided the greatest evolution in economic engineering by way of mathematical theory of shock testing. In this process, a projectile is fired from an airframe on the ground, and the impulse of the recoil is monitored by vibration transducers connected to the airframe and wired to chart recorders. By studying the echoes or reflections of the recoil impulse in the airframe, it is possible to discover critical vibrations in the structure of the airframe, which either vibrations of the engine or alien vibrations of the wings or a combination of the two might reinforce, resulting in a resonant self-destruction of the airframe in flight as an aircraft. From the standpoint of engineering, this means that the strengths and weaknesses of the structure of the airframe in terms of vibrational energy can be discovered and manipulated. Applications in economics. To use this method or airframe shock testing in economic engineering, the prices of commodities are shocked and the public consumer reaction is monitored. The resulting echoes of the economic shock are interpreted theoretically by computers, and the economic structure of the economy is thus discovered. It is by this process that partial differential and difference matrices are discovered that define the family household and make possible its evaluation as an economic industry, dissipative consumer structure. Then the response of the household to future shocks can be predicted and manipulated, and society becomes a well-regulated animal with its reins under the control of a sophisticated computer-regulated social engineering bookkeeping system. Eventually, every individual element of the structure comes under computer control through a knowledge of personal preferences. Such knowledge, guaranteed by computer association of consumer preferences, UPC codes, zebra stripe pricing codes on packages with identified consumers, identified via association with the use of a credit card and later a permanent tattooed body number invisible under the normal ambient illumination. Summary. Economics is only a social extension of a natural energy system. It also has its three passive components. Because of the distribution of wealth and the lack of communication and lack of data, this field has been the last energy field for which a knowledge of these three passive components has been developed. Since energy is the key to all activity on the face of the earth, it follows that in order to attain a monopoly of energy, raw materials, goods, and services, and to establish a world system of slave labor, it is necessary to have a first-strike capability in the field of economics. In order to maintain our position, it is necessary that we have absolute first knowledge of the science of control over all economic factors and the first experience at engineering the world economy. In order to achieve such sovereignty, we must at least achieve this one end, that the public will not make either the logical or mathematical connection between economics and the other energy sciences, or learn to apply such knowledge. This is becoming increasingly difficult to control, because more and more businesses are making demands upon their computer programmers to create and apply mathematical models for the management of those businesses. It is only a matter of time before the new breed of private programmer economists will catch on to the far-reaching implications of the work begun at Harvard in 1948. The speed which they can communicate their warning to the public will largely depend upon how effective we have been at controlling the media, subverting education, and keeping the public distracted with matters of no real importance. The economic model. Economics as a social energy science has as a first objective the description of the complex way in which any given unit of resource is used to satisfy some economic want, Leontief matrix. The first objective, when it is extended to get the most product from the least or limited resources, comprises that objective of general military and industrial logistics known as operations research. See simplex method of linear programming. The Harvard Economic Research Project from 1948 was an extension of World War II operations research. Its purpose was to discover the science of controlling an economy, at first the American economy and then the world economy. It was felt that with sufficient mathematical foundation and data, it would be nearly as easy to predict and control the trend of an economy as to predict and control the trajectory of a projectile. Such has proven to be the case. Moreover, the economy has been transformed into a guided missile on target. The immediate aim of the Harvard project was to discover the economic structure, what forces change that structure, how the behavior of that structure can be predicted, and how it can be manipulated. What was needed was a well-organized knowledge of the mathematical structures and interrelationships of investment, production, distribution, and consumption. To make a short story of it all, it was discovered that an economy obeyed the same laws as electricity, and that all of the mathematical theory and practical and computer know-how developed for the electronic field could be directly applied in the study of economics. This discovery was not openly declared, and its more subtle implications were and are kept a close guarded secret. For example, that in an economic model, human life is measured in dollars, and that the electric spark generated when opening a switch connected to an active inductor is mathematically analogous to the initiation of war. The greatest hurdle which theoretical economists faced was the accurate description of the household as an industry. This is a challenge because consumer purchases are a matter of choice, which in turn is influenced by income, price, and other economic factors. This hurdle was cleared in an indirect and statistically approximate way by an application of shock testing to determine the current characteristics called current technical coefficients of household industry. Finally, because problems in theoretical electronics can be translated very easily into problems of theoretical electronics, and the solution translated back again, it follows that only a book of language translation and concept definition needed to be written for economics. The remainder could be gotten from standard works on mathematics and electronics. This makes the publication of books on advanced economics unnecessary and greatly simplifies project security. This section of the document presents many industrial diagrams, so I'm just going to scroll through these, and you can pause the video if there's anything that you care to read in this section. The social welfare program is nothing more than an open-ended credit balance system which creates a false capital industry to give non-productive people a roof over their heads and food in their stomachs. This can be useful, however, because the recipients become state property in return for the gift, a standing army for the elite. For he who pays the piper picks the tune. Those who get hooked on the economic drug must go to the elite for a fix. In this method of introducing large amounts of stabilizing capacitance is by borrowing on the future credit of the world. This is a fourth law of motion on set and consists of performing an action and leaving the system before the reflected reaction returns to the point of action, a delayed reaction. This means the means of surviving the reaction is by changing the system before the reaction can return. By this means, politicians become more popular in their own time and the public pays later. In fact, the measure of such a politician is the delay time. The same thing is achieved by a government by printing money beyond the limit of the gross national product, an economic process called inflation. This puts a large quantity of money into the hand of the public and maintains a balance against their greed, creates a false self-confidence in them, and for a while stays the wolf from the door. They must eventually resort to war to balance the account, because war ultimately is merely the act of destroying the creditor, and the politicians are the publicly hired hitmen that justify the act to keep the responsibility and blood off the public conscience. See section on consent factors and social economic structuring. If the people really cared about their fellow man, they would control their appetites, greed, procreation, etc., so that they would not have to operate on a credit or welfare social system which steals from the worker to satisfy the bum. Since most of the general public will not exercise restraint, there are only two alternatives to reduce the economic inductance of the system. Let the populace bludgeon each other to death in war, which will only result in a total destruction of the living earth. Take control of the world by the use of economic silent weapons in a form of quiet warfare, and reduce the economic inductance of the world to a safe level by a process of benevolent slavery and genocide. The later option has been taken as the obviously better option. At this point, it should be crystal clear to the reader why absolute secrecy about these silent weapons is necessary. The general public refuses to improve its own mentality and its faith in its fellow man. It has become a herd of proliferating barbarians and, so to speak, a blight upon the face of the earth. They do not care enough about economic science to learn why they have not been able to avoid war despite religious morality, and their religious or self-gratifying refusal to deal with earthly problems renders the solution of the earthly problem unreachable to them. It is left to those few who are truly willing to think and survive as the fittest to survive, to solve the problem for themselves as the few who really care. Otherwise, exposure of the silent weapon would destroy our only hope of preserving the seed of the future true humanity. Now the following is a bunch more technical information. If you're curious, just pause the video. I'm going to scroll through it fairly quickly. One method of evaluating the technical coefficients of the household industry depends upon shocking the prices of a commodity and noting the changes in the sales of all of the commodities. Economic shock testing. In recent times, the application of operations research to the study of public economy has been obvious for anyone who understands the principles of shock testing. In shock testing of an aircraft airframe, the recoil impulse of firing a gun mounted on that aircraft airframe causes shock waves in that structure, which tell aviation engineers the conditions under which some parts of the airplane or the whole airplane or its wings will start to vibrate or flutter like a guitar string, a flute reed, or a tuning fork and disintegrate or fall apart in flight. Economic engineers achieve the same result in studying the behavior of the economy and the consumer publicly by carefully selecting a staple commodity such as beef, coffee, gasoline, or sugar, and then causing a sudden change or shock in its price or availability, thus kicking everybody's budget and buying habits out of shape. They then observe the shock waves which result by monitoring the changes in advertising, prices, and sales of that and other commodities. The objective of such studies is to acquire the know-how to set the public economy into a predictable state of motion or change, even a controlled self-destructive state of motion which will convince the public that certain expert people should take control of the money system and reestablish security rather than liberty and justice for all. When the subject citizens are rendered unable to control their financial affairs, they of course become totally enslaved and a source of cheap labor. Not only the prices of commodities, but also the availability of labor can be used as the means of shock testing. Labor strikes deliver excellent tests. Shock to an economy, especially in the critical service areas of trucking and transportation, communication, public utilities, energy, water, garbage collection, etc. By shock testing, it is found that there is a direct relationship between the availability of money flowing in an economy and the real psychological outlook and response of masses of people dependent upon that availability. For example, there is a measurable quantitative relationship between the price of gasoline and the probability that a person would experience a headache, feel a need to watch a violent movie, smoke a cigarette, or go to a tavern for a mug of beer. It is most interesting that by observing and measuring the economic models by which the public tries to run from their problems and escape from reality, and by applying the mathematical theory of operations research, it is possible to program computers to predict the most probable combination of created events or shocks which will bring about a complete control and subjugation of the public through a subversion of the public economy by shaking the plum tree. Okay, we're going to scroll through some more of the technical data here, and once again, pause the video if you want to read any of it. And this is the result into which we substitute to get that set of conditions of prices of commodities, bad news on TV, etc., which will deliver a collapse of public morale ripe for takeover. Once the economic price and sales coefficients are determined, they may be translated into technical supply and demand coefficients. Shock testing of a given commodity is then repeated to get the time rate of change of these technical coefficients. Introduction to economic amplifiers. Economic amplifiers are the active components of economic engineering. The basic characteristics of any amplifier, mechanical, electrical, or economic, is that it receives an input control signal and delivers energy from an independent energy source to a specified output terminal in a predictable relationship to that input control signal. The simplest form of an economic amplifier is a device called advertising. If a person is spoken to by a TV advertiser as if he were 12 years old, then due to suggestibility, he will, with a certain probability, respond or react to that suggestion with the uncritical response of a 12-year-old, and will reach into his economic reservoir and deliver its energy to put that product on impulse when he passes it in the store. An economic amplifier may have several inputs and output. Its response might be instantaneous or delayed. Its circuit symbol might be a rotary switch if its options are exclusive, qualitative, go or no-go, or it might have its parametric input-output relationships specified by a matrix with internal energy sources represented. Whatever its form might be, its purpose is to govern the flow of energy from a source to an output sink in direct relationship to an input control signal. For this reason, it is called an active circuit element or component. Economic amplifiers fall into classes called strategies, and in comparison with electronic amplifiers, the specific internal functions of an economic amplifier are called logistical instead of electrical. Therefore, economic amplifiers not only deliver power gain, but also in effect are used to cause changes in the economic circuitry. In the design of an economic amplifier, we must have some idea of at least 5 functions, which are the available input signals, the desired output control objectives, the strategic objective, the available economic power sources, the logistical options. The process of defining and evaluating these factors and incorporating the economic amplifier into an economic system has been popularly called game theory. The design of an economic amplifier begins with a specification of the power level of the output, which can range from personal to national. The second condition is accuracy of response. Example, how accurately the output action is a function of the input commands. High gain combined with strong feedback helps to deliver the required precision. Most of the error will be the input data signal. Personal input data tends to be specified, while national input data tends to be statistical. A short list of inputs. Questions to be answered. What, where, why, when, how, and who. General sources of information. Telephone taps, analysis of garbage, surveillance, behavior of children in school, standard of living by, food, shelter, clothing, transportation, social contacts. Telephone itemized record of calls, family, marriage certificates, birth certificates, etc., friends, associates, etc., memberships in organizations, political affiliation. The personal paper trail, personal buying habits, personal consumer preferences, checking accounts, credit card purchases, tagged credit card purchases, the credit card purchase of products bearing the UPC code, assets, checking accounts, savings accounts, real estate, business, automobile, safety deposit at the bank, stock market, liabilities, creditors, enemies, loans, government sources, welfare, Social Security, USDA, surplus food, doles, grants, subsidies, government sources via intimidation, Internal Revenue Service, OSHA, Census, etc., other government sources, surveillance of U.S. mail, habits, patterns, programming, strengths and weaknesses, activities, sports, hobbies, see legal fear, anger, crime record, hospital records, drug sensitivities, reaction to pain, psychiatric records, fears, angers, disgust, adaptability, reactions to stimuli, violence, suggestibility or hypnosis, pain, pleasure, love, and sex, methods of coping of adaptability and behavior, consumption of alcohol, consumption of drugs, entertainment, religious factors influencing behavior, other methods of escaping from reality, payments, pay on time, payment of telephone bills, energy purchases, water purchases, repayment of loans, house payments, automobile payments, payments on credit cards, the political sensitivity, beliefs, contacts, positions, strengths, weaknesses, projects, activities, legal inputs, behavior control, excuses for investigation, search, arrest, or employment of force to modify behavior, court records, police records, driving record, reports made to police, insurance information, anti-establishment acquaintances, national input information, business sources via the IRS, prices of commodities, sales, investments in, stocks, inventory, production tools and machinery, buildings and improvements, the stock market, banks and credit bureaus, credit information, payment information, miscellaneous sources, polls and surveys, publications, telephone records, energy and utility purchases, and short list of outputs. Outputs create controlled situations, manipulation of the economy, hence society, control by control of compensation and income. sequence, allocates opportunities, destroys opportunities, controls the economic environment, controls the availability of raw materials, controls capital, controls bank rates, controls the inflation of the currency, controls the possession of property, controls industrial capacity, controls manufacturing, controls the availability of goods or commodities, controls the prices of commodities, controls services, the labor force, etc., controls payments to government officials, controls the legal functions, controls the personal data files, uncorrectable by the party slandered, controls advertising, controls media contact, controls material available for TV viewing, disengages attention from real issues, engages emotions, creates disorder, chaos, and insanity, controls design and more probing tax forms, controls surveillance, controls the storage of information, develops psychological analysis and profiles of individuals, controls legal functions, controls sociological factors, controls health options, preys on weakness, cripples strengths, leeches wealth and substance. A table of strategies. If you do this, you get this. Keep the public ignorant. Less public organization. Maintain access to control prices, points for feedback, required reaction to output sales, create preoccupation, lowers defenses, attacks the family unit young, control of the education, give less cash and more data, credit and doles, more self-indulgent and more, attack the privacy of the church, destroys faith in the sort of government. Social conformity, computer programming simplicity, minimize the tax program, protest, maximize economic data minimum, enforcement problems, stabilize the consent, simplicity coefficients, tighten control of variables, simpler computer input data, greater predictability, establish boundary conditions, equations, problem simplicity, solutions of differential indifference, proper timing, less data shift and blurring, maximum control, minimum resistance to control, collapse of currency, destroy the faith of the American people in each other. Diversion, the primary strategy. Experience has proven that the simplest method of securing a silent weapon and gaining control of the public is to keep the public undisciplined and ignorant of the basic system principles on the one hand, while keeping them confused, disorganized, and distracted with matters of no real importance on the other hand. This is achieved by disengaging their minds, sabotaging their mental activities, providing a low-quality program of public education in mathematics, logic systems, design, and economics, and discouraging technical creativity, engaging their emotions, increasing their self-indulgence and their indulgence in emotional and physical activities by unrelenting emotional affrontations and attacks, mental and emotional rape by way of constant barrage of sex, violence, and wars in the media, especially the TV and the newspaper, giving them what they desire in excess, junk food for thought, and depriving them of what they really need, rewriting history and law, subjecting the public to the deviant creation, thus being able to shift their thinking from personal needs to highly fabricated outside priorities. These preclude their interest in and discovery of the silent weapons of social automation technology. The general rule is that there is a profit in confusion. The more confusion, the more profit. Therefore, the best approach is to create problems and then offer solutions. Diversion summary. Media. Keep the adult public attention diverted away from the real issues, social issues, and captivated by matters of no real importance. Schools. Keep the young public ignorant of real mathematics, real economics, real law, and real history. Entertainment. Keep the public entertainment below a 6th grade level. Work. Keep the public busy with no time to think, back on the farm with the other animals. Consent, the primary victory. A silent weapon system operates upon data obtained from a docile public by legal, but not always lawful force. Much information is made available to silent weapon system programmers through the Internal Revenue Service. See Studies in Structure of the American Economy for an IRS source list. This information consists of the enforced delivery of well-organized data contained in federal and tax state forms, collected, assembled, and submitted by slave labor provided by taxpayers and employers. Furthermore, the number of such forms submitted to the IRS is a useful indicator of public consent, an important factor in strategic decision-making. Other data sources are given in the short list of inputs. consent coefficients, numerical feedback indicating victory status, psychological basis. When the government is able to collect tax and seize private property without just compensation, it is an indication that the public is ripe for surrender and is consenting to enslavement and legal encroachment. A good and easily quantified indicator of harvest time is the number of public citizens who pay income tax despite an obvious lack of reciprocal or honest service from the government. Amplification energy sources. The next step in the process of designing an economic amplifier is discovering the energy sources. The energy source which support any primitive economic system are, of course, a supply of raw materials and the consent of the people to labor, and consequently assume a certain rank, position, level, or class in the social structure to provide labor at various levels in the pecking order. Each class, in guaranteeing its own level of income, controls the class immediately below it, hence preserves the class structure. This provides stability and security, but also government from the top. As time goes on and communication and education improve, the lower class elements of the social labor structure become knowledgeable and envious of the good things that the upper class members have. They also begin to attain a knowledge of energy systems and the ability to enforce their rise through the class structure. This threatens the sovereignty of the elite. If this rise of the lower class can be postponed long enough, the elite can achieve energy dominance, and labor by consent no longer will hold a position of an essential energy source. Until such energy dominance is absolutely established, the consent of people to labor and let others handle their affairs must be taken into consideration, since failure to do so could cause the people to interfere in the final transfer of energy sources to the control of the elite. It is essential to recognize that at this time, public consent is still an essential key to the release of energy in the process of economic amplification. Therefore, the consent as energy release mechanism will now be considered. Logistics. The successful application of a strategy requires a careful study of inputs-outputs, the strategy connecting the inputs and outputs, and the available energy sources to fuel the strategy. This study is called logistics. A logistical problem is studied at the elementary level first, and then levels of greater complexity are studied as a synthesis of elementary factors. This means that a given system is analyzed, i.e. broken down into subsystems, and these in turn are analyzed until by this process one arrives at the logistical atom, the individual. This is where the process of synthesis properly begins at the time of birth of the individual. The artificial womb. From the time a person leaves its mother's womb, its every effort is directed towards building, maintaining, and withdrawing into artificial wombs various sorts of substitute protective devices or shells. The objective of these artificial wombs is to provide a stable environment for both stable and unstable activity, to provide a shelter for the evolutionary process of growth and maturity, example survival, to provide security for freedom, and to provide defensive protection for offensive activity. This is equally true of both the general public and the elite. However, there is a definite difference in the way each of these classes go about the solution of problems. The political structure of a nation, dependency. The primary reason why the individual citizens of a country create a political structure is a subconscious wish or desire to perpetuate their own dependency relationship of childhood. Simply put, they want a human god to eliminate all risks from their life, pat them on the head and kiss their bruises, put a chicken on every dinner table, clothe their bodies, tuck them into bed at night, and tell them that everything will be all right when they wake up in the morning. This public demand is incredible, so the human god, the politician, meets incredibility with incredibility by promising the world and delivering nothing. So who is the bigger liar, the public or the godfather? This public behavior is surrender born of fear, laziness, and expediency. It is the basis of the welfare state as a strategic weapon useful against a disgusting public. Action, offense. Most people want to be able to subdue and or kill other human beings which disturb their daily lives, but they do not want to have to cope with the moral and religious issues which such an overt act on their part might raise. Therefore, they assign the dirty work to others, including their own children, so as to keep the blood off their hands. They rave about rave about the humane treatment of animals and then sit down to a delicious hamburger from a whitewashed slaughterhouse down the street and out of sight. But even more hypocritical, they pay taxes to finance a professional association of hitmen collectively called politicians and then complain about corruption in government. Responsibility. Again, most people want to be free to do things, to explore, etc., but they're afraid to fail. The fear of failure is manifested in irresponsibility, and especially in delegating those personal responsibilities to others where success is uncertain or carries possible or created liabilities, which the person is not prepared to accept. They want authority, root word author, but they will not accept responsibility or liability, so they hire politicians to face reality for them. Summary. The people hire the politicians so that the people can obtain security without managing it, obtain action without thinking about it, inflict theft, injury, and death upon others without having to contemplate either life or death, avoid responsibility for their own intentions, obtain the benefits of reality and science without exerting themselves in the discipline of facing or learning either of these things. They give the politicians the power to create and manage a war machine, to provide for the survival of the nation or womb, prevent encroachment of anything upon the nation or womb, destroy the enemy who threatens the nation or womb, destroy those citizens of their country who do not conform for the sake of stability of the nation or womb. Politicians hold many quasi-military jobs, the lowest being the police, which are soldiers, the attorneys and CPAs next, who are spies and saboteurs, licensed, and the judges, who shout out orders and run the closed union military shop for whatever the market will bear. The generals are industrialists. The presidential level of commander-in-chief is shared by the international bankers. The people know that they have created this farce and financed it with their own taxes, given consent, but they would rather knuckle under than be the hypocrite. Thus a nation becomes divided into two very distinct parts: a docile subnation, a great silent majority, and a political subnation. The political subnation remains attached to the docile subnation, tolerates it, and leaches its substance until it grows strong enough to detach itself and then devour its parent. System analysis. In order to make meaningful computerized economic decisions about war, the primary economic flywheel, it is necessary to assign concrete logistical values to each element of the war structure, personal and material alike. This process begins with a clear and candid description of the subsystems of such a structure. The draft as a military service. Few efforts of human behavior modification are more remarkable or more effective than that of the socio-military institution known as the draft. A primary purpose of a draft or other such institution is to instill by intimidation in the young males of a society the uncritical conviction that the government is omnipotent. He is soon taught that a prayer is slow to reverse what a bullet can do in an instance. Thus a man trained in a religious environment for 18 years of his life can, by this instrument of the government, be broken down, be purged of his fantasies and delusions in a matter of mere months. Once that conviction is instilled, all else becomes easy to instill. Even more interesting is the process by which a young man's parents, who perpetually love him, can be induced to send him off to war for his death. Although the scope of this work will not allow this matter to be expanded in full detail, nevertheless a course overview will be possible and can serve to reveal those factors which must be included in some numerical form in a computer analysis of social and war systems. We begin with a tentative definition of the draft. The draft, or selective service, is an institution of compulsory collective sacrifice and slavery devised by the middle-aged and elderly for the purpose of pressing the young into doing the public dirty work. It further serves to make the youth as guilty as the elders, thus making criticism of the elders by the youth less likely. Generational stabilizer. It is marketed and sold to the public under the label of patriotic national service. Once a candid economic definition of the draft is achieved, that definition is used to outline the boundaries of a structure called a human value system, which in turn is translated into the terms of game theory. The value of such a slave laborer is given the table of a human value, a table broken down into categories by intellect, experience, post-service, job demand, etc. Some of these categories are ordinary and can be tentatively evaluated in terms of the value of certain jobs for which a known fee exists. Some jobs are harder to value because they are unique to the demands of social subversion. For an extreme example, the value of a mother's instruction to her daughter, causing that daughter to put certain behavioral demands upon a future husband 10 or 15 years hence. Thus, by suppressing his resistance to a perversion of a government, making it easier for a banking cartel to buy the state of New York in, say, 20 years. Such a problem leans heavily upon the observations and data of wartime espionage and many types of psychological testing. But crude mathematical models, algorithms, can be devised, if not to predict, at least to predeterminate these events with maximum certainty. What does not exist by natural cooperation is thus enhanced by calculated compulsion. Human beings are machines, levers which may be grasped and turned, and there is little real difference between the automating of a society and automating a shoe factory. These derived values are variable. It is necessary to use a current table of human values for computer analysis. These values are given in true measures rather than US dollars, since the latter is unstable, being presently inflated beyond the production of national goods and services so as to give the economy a false kinetic energy, paper inductance. The silver value is stable, it being possible to buy the same amount with a gram of silver today as it could be bought in 1920. Human value measured in silver units changes slightly due to the change in production technology. Enforcement. Factor 1. As in every social system approach, stability is achieved only by understanding and accounting for human nature, action-reaction patterns. A failure to do so can be, and usually is, disastrous. As in other human social schemes, one form or another of intimidation or incentive is essential to the success of the draft. Physical principles of action and reaction must be applied to both internal and external subsystems. To secure the draft, individual brainwashing or programming in both the family unit and the peer group must be engaged and brought under control. Factor 2. Father. The man of the household must be housebroken to ensure that Junior will grow up with the right social training and attitudes. The advertising, media, etc. are engaged to see to it that that father-to-be is pussy-whipped before or by the time he is married. He is taught that either he conforms to the social notch cut out for him, or his sex life will be hobbled and his tender companionship will be zero. He is made to see that women demand security more than logical, principled, or honorable behavior. By the time his son must go to war, father, with jelly for a backbone, will slam a gun into Junior's hand before father will risk the censor of his peers, or make a hypocrite of himself by crossing the investment he has in his own personal opinion or self-esteem. Junior will go off to war, or father will be embarrassed, so Junior will go to war, the true purpose notwithstanding. Factor 3. Mother. The female element of human society is ruled by emotion first and logic second. In the battle between logic and imagination, imagination always wins. Fantasy prevails, maternal instinct dominates, so that the child comes first and the future comes second. A woman with a newborn baby is too starry-eyed to see a wealthy man's cannon fodder or a cheap source of slave labor. A woman must, however, be conditioned to accept the transition to reality when it comes, or sooner. As the transition becomes more difficult to manage, the family unit must be carefully disintegrated, and state-controlled public education and state-operated child care centers must become more common and legally enforced so as to begin the detachment of the child from the mother and father at an earlier age. Inoculation of behavioral drugs, Ritalin, can speed the transition for the child. Mandatory. Caution. A woman's impulsive anger can override her fear. An irate woman's power must never be underestimated, and her power over a pussy-whipped husband must likewise never be underestimated. It got a woman the vote in 1920. Factor 4. Junior. The emotional pressure for self-preservation during the time of war and the self-serving attitude of the common herd that have an option to avoid the battlefield, if Junior can be persuaded to go, is all the pressure finally necessary to propel Johnny off the war. Their quiet blackmailings of him are the threats. No sacrifice, no friends, no glory, no girlfriends. Factor 5. The sister. And what about Junior's sister? She is given all the good things of life by her father and taught to expect the same from her future husband regardless of the price. Factor 6. Cattle. Those who will not use their brains are no better off than those who have no brains. And so this mindless school of jellyfish, father, mother, son, and daughter, become useful beasts of burden or trainers of the same. This concludes what is available of this document. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to listen, and I would highly encourage you to visit www.stopthecrime.net. It's where this document came from, and I will include links below in the description. And thank you very much again for listening. And get this out to your friends and family. Tell them about stopthecrime.net. Show them the article. You can download it from there.
We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
Deborah Tavares starts tonight off her first hour. She, of course, is a fountain of knowledge of all kinds of different things that are being unleashed and used to assault our way of life, our health, our future, our dignity, our freedom, our liberty, and all the rest of it. Deborah, welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for having me back on tonight. And I know that we're going to cover a lot of information. So the very first thing that I'm going to ask everyone to do is go to our website, stopthecrime.net, either during the show or at some point after, and download all of the source documents while you can still get online and download these documents. Keep them on file. It is absolutely important, Jeff, that everyone, and I know most of your listeners know, our government has been seized.
Oh, it's absolutely. A historic coup has taken place. In fact, not just the government, I think our way of life has been
absolutely. We're under massive assault. And, you know, everybody right now is talking about whether we have the right to be surveilled or not. The real question is, will we even survive? And in the source documents that we're going to go over tonight, all through those documents, they say that we do not ask the right questions. And so I can say that the elites believe that every action, no matter how cruel or evil, is for the greater good. So everyone needs to keep that in mind. Their motto is terror and disinformation. And if you remember that, you'll get most everything else right. And that includes going to your local city council meetings like we did over the last few days. And I'll just say a couple of points about that because people need to know on a local level how to look at the source documents that we're going to be going through.
Again, that's stopthecrime.net.
That is correct.
Right.
First, I want to tell everybody this is posted on the website, stopthecrime.net, and it is a nationwide alert. A major university has teamed up with Google Earth to identify if your private property is infected, and they're using GPS coordinates, and I won't go into that in great detail other than to say that California and parts of Oregon are being attacked with a sudden oak death syndrome. It's affecting trees, oak trees and laurel trees. The trees are dropping by the hundreds, and this has been happening since the late 90s.
Oh, no, they've lost tens of thousands of oaks.
And yes, they have. They're deforesting us. In the Iron Mountain documentary and in the report, you will see the intention is to deforest us. And this sudden oak death syndrome is a cover, a guise for the geoengineering program that is being kept secret, and the government won't discuss that. So look at that on our website. This is an unbelievable thing. They're telling us, Jeff, that when you go door to door to your neighbors to ask them if you can collect dead leaves that look like they may have the sudden oak death disease, then you can put it in a UC Berkeley collection packet That will be shipped down to the lab, and it will be determined if those trees are in fact infected, and then that will be placed on Google Earth map so that everyone can see where the infected areas are. Now, if there are as many infected areas as we know there are, we know that this is nationwide, and not oak trees. They'll identify other trees because trees are dying by the hundreds of thousands all over the planet. In any event, they say that you track this mold on your shoes, your tires, your bikes, any tools, camping equipment, what have you, and you've got to disinfect everything that you go into the forest with bleach and use a heavy brush. We know that ultimately they're going to restrict access into the parks. This is all a guise. This is the Wildlands Project in action. This is going to limit and end our ability to go into the open space. And yesterday, our County Board of Supervisors here in Sonoma County, which is the north coast of California, just 5-0, fortunately, disapproved the state parks wanting to implement what they call an Iron Ranger, where they want to charge you to park in the parking lot to go down to the beaches.
Yeah,
so I
know.
can tell you right now we're under massive attack. But more than that, before we all are lobotomized with all the chemicals that they're dumping on us, and while we all can still think we must get this information out as quickly as possible and digest it in as tight of bundles of information as possible. So that's why we've put those source documents up, selected those documents, because we believe that if everybody were to read the Silent Weapons Quiet Wars document and then go scroll on down through those documents within 10 hours, they would be pretty much up to speed.
Right.
And they would then know how to take that information into their local city councils and understand what is happening to them, because we are being murdered right now. And Jeff, we've been warned. The documents have been available for a very long time. It's not too late for people to quickly get on the learning curve, because the plans that they have for us are accelerating. And so as this acceleration continues and as more of their plans are revealed, it's going to be more unimaginable for people. So the sooner the better. We are in a new reality, and we have to move over psychologically into the new reality because of the massive deception that we have been fed and the matrix that we have been in.
Well, soon the gap will be too far for people to bridge. Doesn't matter how much is on the internet. You're right. They just won't be able to believe it.
That's why we've got to work quickly. We've got to get this information out. People need to read the silent weapons. And I'm going to read a quote that the FBI director said. He said, "The individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists. The American mind simply has not come to the realization of the evil which has been introduced into our midst. It rejects even the assumption that human creatures could espouse a philosophy which must ultimately destroy all that is good and decent."
That's right, because the controllers are sociopaths, psychopaths. They don't look at morally anything, and in fact they think that morality is a weakness, and they laugh at it. They prey on it because people are hung up on basic moral guidelines. At least they used to be, and that's the problem.
Well, they are, and in their documents they will tell everyone that reads them just that. And the quote was from the former FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, in 1956. Kennedy also has had some warning quotes as well. They're posted on stopthecrime.net. But I want to move into the silent weapons document after I just go over the fact that, of course, everyone knows that America is under a lawless legal system and the Constitution is no more. We're now USA Inc.
Correct.
We are being run by mega corporations and mega banks posing as legitimate government, which they're not. And sadly, many still are living with the illusion created by the propaganda media machine, CNN, ABC, NBC, Fox, the BBC, etc. And the FCC and the WHO and the AMA and the EPA, all of these agencies are just simply agencies under the mother corporation, USA Inc. and Earth Inc. We're in Earth Inc. So it is most important to understand that. And as far as...
Deborah, in the aggregate, all the organizations from the mainstream media to the AMA really compromise the fourth branch of government. We have four branches now. And they are all accountable, of course, to these mega corporations. But that's the fourth branch of government.
Absolutely. Well, I can tell you that we are now Earth Inc., and according to documents and according to the facts, that's where we are at this point. So moving into the silent weapons document, it's really important to understand that...
Where do we find it on the page? Help people find it.
Okay, well, I'm going to go through page by page, but I'm just going to do a general summary of a couple of paragraphs right now, and then I will start listing page numbers as I go through specific
Okay,
things.
but where on the page can they find it? That's what I wanted to point them to.
On the website. Okay, under stopthecrime.net, source documents, and then you'll see silent weapons, quiet
top in the middle. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
all right.
Yes, and then open that up. And then people can follow along, or they can listen to this later and go through the document as we discuss it.
Very good.
But just a general overlay right now, and then we'll go into page numbers. It's very, very important to understand the policy of the silent weapons, and it maps out the covert schemes and the fact that war was declared upon all people by this diabolical group. The silent weapons system is a type of biological warfare which attacks the vitality, options, and mobility of individuals of a society by knowing, understanding, manipulating, and attacking their sources of natural and social energy and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. This weapon is applied gradually. The public adjusts and adapts to its presence and learns to tolerate its encroachment on their lives until the pressure, the psychological via the economic, becomes too great and they crack up. The public cannot comprehend this weapon and cannot believe that they're being attacked and subdued by a weapon.
Yep.
So this is very important to understand how they devised the silent weapon strategy. So now we're on page 4 of the silent weapons document. And I will tell you, though, that it is a policy that was adopted by the Bilderbergs at their first Bilderberg meeting in 1954. And so that is where this started, and you can read that prior to page 4. Okay, the manual, it says, the manual itself is an analog, a declaration of intent. It says such a writing must be secured from public scrutiny. Otherwise, it would be recognized as a formal declaration of domestic war. And they say a domestic war exists between the said persons or groups of persons and the public. And it talks about how the solutions of today's problems require an approach which is ruthlessly candid, with no agonizing over religious, moral, or cultural values. They go on page 5, to discuss how the Rockefeller Foundation got in on the ground floor by making a 4-year grant to Harvard College, funding the Harvard Economic Research Project for the study of the structure of the American economy. And then 1 year later, in 1949, the United States Air Force joined in. We're going to talk about the United States Air Force when we move on over into the NASA war document, but I want you to take note. The Air Force joined in. We're moving over to page 6 of the silent weapons document. The quiet war was quietly declared by the international elite at a meeting held in 1954. And then under energy on page 6, they talk about all science is merely a means to an end. The means is knowledge, the end is control. Beyond this remains only one issue: who will be the beneficiary? And in 1954, this was the primary issue of concern. Although the so-called moral issues were raised, in the view of law of natural selection, it was agreed that a nation or world of people that will not use their intelligence are no better than animals and who do not have intelligence. So people are beasts of burden and stakes on the table by choice and consent. They talk about in the interest of the future of the world and peace and tranquility, it was decided to privately wage a quiet war against the American public with an ultimate objective of permanently shifting the natural and social energy, the wealth of the undisciplined and irresponsible many, into the hands of the self-disciplined, responsible, and worthy few.
When did Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars first appear? Was it in Cooper's book, or did someone have it before that?
Well, it was prior to that, and at the beginning of the document, it does discuss where this was originally found in the preface. So I encourage everybody to
What year would that have been? It was supposed to have been found in a government copy machine.
Yeah, it was in. It was found in a Boeing aircraft copy machine that was IBM, actually copier, that was purchased for scrap, and it was found on July 7th of 1986. And then it was massively released, and then, of course, William Cooper heard about it, and that became one of the beginnings of his book. That's a whole document in the beginning of his book. Right, he just
dropped the whole thing in there. I read it first in well, it had to be 88 or 89. It was a shocker.
Well, it is a shocker, and I'm going to tell you what they talk about, what the purpose of the silent weapons is. They said the silent weapons quiet wars was necessary to create and secure and apply new weapons, which they say was a class of weapons so subtle and sophisticated in their principle of operation and the public appearance as to earn themselves the name silent weapons. And here's what they describe. Everything that is expected of an ordinary weapon is expected from a silent weapon by its creator. It shoots situations instead of bullets, propelled by data processing instead of chemical reactions or explosives, originating from bits of data instead of grains of gunpowder, from a computer instead of a gun, operated by a computer programmer instead of a marksman, under the orders of a banking magnate instead of a military general. They say that it makes no obvious explosive noises, causes no obvious physical or mental injuries, and does not obviously interfere with anyone's daily or social life. Yet, it makes an unmistakable noise, causes unmistakable physical and mental damage, and unmistakably interferes with the daily and social life, unmistakable to a trained observer. But, Jeff, what I really want to start out by saying is that everyone's got to realize that October 21st of 1945, the U.S. became a charter member of the United Nations, and we relinquished our sovereignty in order to become a charter member. And we no longer have any sovereign. We're not sovereign. Right. And our republic has been lost. And we're no longer under law. We are in a matrix under false pretenses, and we have been lied to and deceived. This is what this entire NSA facility is in Bluffdale, Utah, where I went on July the 3rd and the 4th to go there and bring awareness to that massive 1 million square foot facility in Bluffdale, Utah. And I can tell you that we will have on our site, as soon as we get it up there, we will have the last footage of a private vehicle driving up the Redwood Road up to the turnaround. What we were able to film before security launched on us and threatened us with fines and detained us for quite some time was...
Were these more rent-a-thugs? Were they basically just trying to belittle you? Were they threatening? What was their... Or are they just trying to pretend like they're being properly professional?
No, they were absolutely threatening. We drove up from the main road to a turnaround area, and there were only two signs that said you cannot bring guns, animals unless it's seeing eye, dog. They said that you needed authorization. So we went up there to ask for authorization and a tour of the facility and explained that we were out of state, that I had heard about the facility, and we wanted to speak to somebody that could give us a tour. He laughed at us and said, "There are no tours here." We said, "Well, certainly with 1 million square feet, you have somebody that can talk to us about what this facility is." He said, "We're here illegally. We want your IDs immediately." And, of course, the driver of our rental car did give his license, but when he asked for mine, I said I wasn't driving. He didn't push the license. But we were detained for about 20 minutes under threat. He walked around the vehicle writing. It looked like he was going to write a ticket. He was talking to somebody, and it was extremely worrisome because we we were being absolutely intimidated, Jeff. And when we finally left, after we were able to get some pictures, some photographs of the bronze medallions up there that you can only see if you're in the spot where we were, and we'll be posting that. But as we were leaving, they were in the process of building gates and fencing at the base of the hill.
Yeah.
So at this point,
$2 billion U.S. tax dollars at work. Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, we left, and the following day we did have a rally. It was a peaceful assembly to bring awareness to the NSA facility, and I can only tell you that we marched down the main road. There were literally dozens and dozens of police presence, as well as military personnel, and it was quite a photographed moment for sure. What is so important is what we were warned about in the silent weapons document, and this speaks to exactly what Snowden is doing right now. And this is on page 7 of, this is on page 11 of the silent weapons document, and this is very, very important for everybody to hear, because it says, since energy is the key to all activity on the face of the earth, it follows that in order to attain a monopoly of energy, which is raw materials, goods, services, and to establish a world system of slave labor, it is essential to have the first strike capability in the field of economics. In order to maintain our position, it is necessary that we have absolute first knowledge of the science of control over all economic factors and the first experience at engineering the world economy. In order to achieve such sovereignty, this is the elite sovereignty, we must at least achieve this one end, that the public will not make either the logical or mathematical connection between economics and other energy sciences or learn to apply such knowledge. This is becoming increasingly difficult to control because more and more businesses are making demands upon their computer programmers to create and apply mathematical models for the management of their businesses.
Right.
It is only a matter of time before the new breed of private programmers and economists will catch on to the far-reaching implications of the work begun at Harvard in 1948. The speed with which they can communicate this warning to the public will largely depend upon how effective we have been at controlling the media, subverting education, and keeping the public distracted with matters of no real importance.
Right.
This is absolutely key. And we are absolutely being attacked by a silent weapons system right now. And everybody listening must go to stopthecrime.net to the source documents and read the silent weapons document. Because now we're going to also be talking about the NASA war document here in a bit.
Good.
I wanted to set that up by saying in the silent weapons document on page 8, it says a silent system is applied gradually. The public adjusts and adapts to its presence and learns to tolerate its encroachment on their lives until the pressure, psychological via economic, becomes too great and they crack up.
That's the boiling frog principle.
Yes. They say the silent weapons system is a type of biological warfare. It attacks the vitality, options, and mobility of the individuals of a society by knowing, understanding, manipulating, and attacking their sources of natural and social energy and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. And that is what is happening right now. And what our biggest concern at this moment, while they're distracting us with many, many things, is the ultimate, which the elites are striving for, and that's global mind control. I want to also talk a little bit more about the NSA facility that we visited on July the 4th, and I want to talk about a little about quantum computing. And it is the next phase of data analysis, and after each and every human being on the planet has been successfully profiled and cataloged in the NSA global data bank, it's simply a practice known as biosociology, or the molding by the global elite. It is what the global elites have been striving for, and in the silent weapons document, It will tell you. They were planning the who, where, why, when, and what of each person, and massive data collection. The new revelations now of the IRS is not new news. All of our Congress is inept. They've been taken. We are being run by globalist international banks and mega corporations posing as a government, and it is not. We have been taken, and people need to understand we have lawless laws at this point. When you read the silent weapons document, you will find that they put in position in all places necessary to advance their agenda. And when you look at the Iron Mountain report, which is also on our website, you need to understand we're under a United Nations planned occupation of America, and that plan is to process our families domestically, and we are being conquered right now. And even in the Iron Mountain document, it talks about how they are going to circumvent the Constitution, and they have. So everyone needs to at least get to those documents immediately, get caught up. We have been lied, misinformed, and we have been absolutely put in a fear-based reality. That is how this illusion has gone to the extent that it has. The globalists operate on two facts: to create fear that is equal to loss of life and loss of lifestyle, and to massively create and cause disinformation. And when we look at what has happened at the NSA facility, one of the main concerns with this NSA facility, besides gathering data on every single one of us, which is also under the United Nations Agenda 21 or Future Earth Protocol, it's a global inventory, and that's what they're doing right now. They're inventorying our food supplies. They're sending insurance companies out to our properties with GPS devices to locate.
Yes, they are.
To locate fruit trees. Under the USDA. So the most important thing is we cannot concede, we cannot permit, and we cannot comply to this massive data collection. We've got to stay out of it as much as possible. But one of the most disturbing aspects of the quantum computers with the NSA facility is that it can interfere with encrypted codes, and all encrypted codes will become obsolete. They say the quantum computers are specifically designed to crack even the most sophisticated encrypted codes on the planet. And this means that if the NSA cartel criminals desire it, they can steal everything, not only all of the nuclear launch codes, but our medical records, our tax records, bank accounts. We have cameras on every single street corner, on our roads, on buildings. They are everywhere. And this is what the smart meter, the global smart grid, is all about, this massive data collecting. And we must remove these smart meters off our properties. We cannot allow our utility companies to do this to us. These are biohazards. We are being attacked. And the weapon of choice is a silent weapon. This is a quiet war system, and they're using frequencies and data mining. And this is for ultimate mind control.
So what they've done is Microsoft was set up so that there would be one global operating system that the U.S. government had a backdoor into for all computers everywhere in the world.
Right.
Then they set up Google as a search engine, and let's just look at the background of the two guys who supposedly set it up.
Larry Page and Sergey Brin.
That's right. Now, Sergey Brin he was born in Russia, so he's from an immigrant family. But listen to this. His father was a mathematician who worked at the University of Maryland, and his mother worked for NASA.
I didn't know that one. Well, it's like a blue-blood line.
NASA, and that is exactly where Sergey Brin and Larry Page park their private jets.
Of course.
Is at the NASA facility.
Mm-hmm. They don't have to go through TSA. Gosh, what a surprise.
Right. Larry Page is an American. His parents were both computer science professors at Michigan State University, and his father was one of the top experts in the United States on artificial intelligence. Now, Sergey Brin married a Polish-American woman called n.w.o. So as soon as n.w.o. married Sergey Brin, she was given millions of dollars in venture capital the day of the wedding.
I think she got $20 million just to start.
Right.
That's right. All right, hold on. Lorraine Moret is our guest tonight, a longtime friend of good people everywhere on the planet. Her work on depleted uranium, of course, really knows no bounds and needs not much of an introduction. She's talked about it too many times to count around the world and on this program as well. We're talking about Google and DNA and control. Next time you hit the Google search function, just keep in mind that your finger is doing a lot more than simply looking up information. You're helping to propel a monster on the planet. It is a beast. It's unbelievable what's going on. Go ahead.
It's unbelievable. And what I want to emphasize is that Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and the social networking websites,
all of them.
eBay, Skype, Google Mail, Yahoo Mail, PayPal, these are all the same entity. They're all integrated. They get bought and sold and traded around. These are all U.S. Navy and military operations. Now, I know a physicist who told me that they were tracking people in the lab by the electromagnetic frequency emitted by individuals' DNA. In other words, every living thing is an antenna that transmits and receives. We're an electrical system, and the DNA in every living thing has a unique frequency and signal. That is what they're using, what they're focusing on, and what they're weaponizing to completely control us. The DNA Human Genome Project was carried out at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, where I was a staff scientist for 5 years. But the Lawrence Livermore Lab, Los Alamos National Lab, these are all nuclear weapons labs, were also involved. That means the military, because the nuclear weapons labs exist for the Pentagon, and the Pentagon exists for the oil companies. So the Human Genome Project was set up and well-funded to experiment and to research and to describe the human genome. Now, how would they use that? Well, what we know about Google is that they are doing DNA surveys from space. This would be NASA and the Navy. NASA is run by the Navy. They have been tracking and identifying isolated populations, for instance, in the Amazon, who have never had contact with Western people. These are villages of isolated people who are still living their traditional hunter-gatherer lives,
right?
And they've never seen a Westerner. That's not just humans. They are also doing a global species survey, and I've been tracking this for 2 years and noticed that many new species are being discovered, and it seems to be on a grid system. So they're doing a survey from space, and they went down the west coast of South America and then came up the east coast, and now they're in Southeast Asia. And if you watch in the news, about once a week they come up with a new article and photos on new species they've discovered. This is part of the United Nations Agenda 21 program, which is to identify all species and to do a complete global inventory of humans and animals And what David Rockefeller has said about Agenda 21 is that in the end, we're going to have a chip on every person, and they will only be allowed to take out of the system what they put into it. If you work 12 hours a day, you're allowed to take 12 hours of something of value out of the system, but nothing more. What is going on? The J. Greg Venter Institute, which you sent me the article,
right,
has their mission as, quote, to forge new life forms, unquote. And they are also involved in manipulated computer code on DNA. What does this mean? Well, Dr. Helen Wallace from GeneWatch in 2002 said, we are in great danger, and she described this as a massive DNA database by the back door.
Now, what this does sociologically, it begins to set up a caste system here, which we already have, but this is a different way of doing it. I don't know where it's all going to go, but it's clearly hurtling forward at a pace that is pretty damn scary if you understand the potential of control here.
And what they're doing is using computing, medicine, technology, and the police state to converge into basically what is creating a totalitarian scientific oligarchy. And their purpose is to get this information and use it in discriminatory programs where the rich benefit and the poor are impacted negatively by these programs. And the second part of that agenda is the depopulation initiatives. Now, a really good example about this biopiracy. Now, I did an interview with Dr. Wynne Parker. So on the air, I was talking about depleted uranium and the tremendous affinity it has for the DNA and mitochondria, because uranium and phosphate structures, they have a love affair all through the universe. And that means that when people are exposed to uranium particles from these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Yugoslavia, and by the way, it's over here in 2 weeks in the U.S., and we're inhaling it.
Sure, all the time.
It sticks to our DNA and our mitochondria that provide all the energy for the body.
Somebody made the decision to go ahead and use it against the people in Yugoslavia and then Iraq, knowing full well what would happen. And that's a party I would like to see brought to justice, whoever that was.
So, as I was sitting there describing all of this to Dr. Parker, and I was talking about HARP, this is all integrated into the HARP system, I knew that Dr. Parker, Wynne Parker was not his real name. I knew he was a CIA scientist. I knew he'd worked for the U.S. government, for the Department of Defense, for the World Health Organization, and the UN at different times. And I knew that he was a microbiologist who knew the whole field because he had to advise the government. And so I just said, Dr. Parker, what is the application of this discovery that nanoparticles are transmitters? And he caught his breath and he said, well, it's to redesign the human genome.
That's all, huh?
That's all.
They're going to create a new species, is what they're talking about here. Basically.
It's to create anything they want to.
That's right.
It's to repeat anything they want to. It's this totalitarian, insane scientific oligarchy that's run by psychopaths, and they think they can do anything they want to.
Well, so far nobody's around to stop them, unfortunately.
Now, what is transmitting and receiving that's around us? Well, how about cell phones in the megahertz frequency band? These are some abstracts that I'm going to just read the titles of. This is 1996, single and double-strand DNA breaks in rat brain cells after acute exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic radiation, and they used the cell phone frequencies. DNA strand breaks in rat brain cells. So they're talking about sterility, about cancer, and about altering people's behavior. And the airport scanners are doing the same thing.
Wouldn't surprise me. I'm amazed that there's very little attention being paid to the electric grid. And as all of you listening know, it is surrounding you and everybody you know 24 hours a day. Your home, your office, it doesn't matter. It's called wiring in your walls. And that 60 hertz electric service that you rely on to power your goodies can also be used to carry any kind of telecommunication business you can imagine, and I would submit mind and behavior altering and control platforms as well. It's all doable.
It's very simple to do because we are electrical systems and we transmit and receive just like any other antenna.
We're electrical first and chemical second. We are electric beings.
That's right. And a lot of this was described in the 1930s in the lectures that Bertrand Russell gave at Oxford University. And I would like to read a paragraph, if that's okay.
Yeah, we have 3 minutes, so you have to hurry.
Okay. A totalitarian government with a scientific bent might do things that to us would seem horrifying. The Nazis were more scientific than the present rulers of Russia and were more inclined to the atrocities that I have in mind. If they had survived, they would probably have soon taken to scientific breeding. Any nation which adopts this practice will, within a generation, secure great military advantages. The system, one may surmise, will be something like this, except possibly in the governing aristocracy. All but 5% of males and 30% of females will be sterilized. The 30% of females will be expected to spend the years from 18 to 40 in reproduction in order to secure adequate cannon fodder. As a rule, artificial insemination will be preferred to the natural method. The unsterilized, if they desire the pleasures of love, will usually have to seek them with sterilized partners. In other words, Jeff, Bertrand Russell's message is that wild reproduction is no longer an option.
Yeah.
So basically, they have unlimited budgets. They have an unlimited scientific body in universities to do all this research. And today, over 50% of scientific research money in universities comes from the Pentagon.
It used to be that your privacy was invaded by people breaking into your home, listening to your phone calls, opening your mail. But technology has made it far easier for criminals and governments to invade your privacy. As a matter of fact, you could argue that metadata is far more dangerous than just listening to people's phone calls or opening their emails. InfoWars has been warning you about this for a long time. Here's just one article from 4 years ago where we told you about Google's cozy relationship with the CIA, joining with them in an internet monitoring project that would scour Twitter accounts, blogs, and websites and be used to, quote, predict the future. Google's venture capital firm and the CIA's In-Q-Tel invested $10 million into a company called Recorded Future. Using metadata, Google and the government can predict not only societal trends, but individual action, knowing better than you do where you will likely be at a certain time. That's being done with metadata, not with your phone calls or your email. But now the surveillance state gets far more intrusive and sinister. Not content to invade your home, your mail, your computer, the government has been working for decades on ways to invade your mind, monitoring your thoughts, controlling your actions, even implanting or changing your memories. And InfoWars has been pointing this out for a long time as well. Look at this article from 11 years ago. Now if you Google it, you'll easily find over 349,000 results in less than half a second. And the government and its media have gone from ridiculing reports of their mind control research, calling you a conspiracy theorist if you report it, to taking credit for it, even putting a humanitarian spin on their demonic creation. The mainstream media is positively giddy about the prospects of mind control and memory manipulation.
How will the IT revolution help change our minds, improve our lives? Are we going to cure diseases like Alzheimer's, move objects just by looking at them?
DARPA wants you to see the purpose of their research as producing a medical device for Alzheimer's or PTSD. DARPA also wants you to see their militarized robots as something that will save your life in a natural disaster. They want you to believe that building a robot that can run faster than a human is to save you, not to hunt you down. Of course, DARPA's evil inventions could be used for benevolent purposes, but benevolent medical devices are not DARPA's mission. Their mission statement says that it's to overcome multifaceted threats, to wield cyber as a military capability, to open new operational regimes with advanced platforms and weapons, and to build a strong foundation for tomorrow's military. DARPA weaponizes technology. They're not looking for a cure for Alzheimer's. They're not even looking for a cure for PTSD. They're looking for a way to weaponize mind control. Keep that in mind when you hear this.
We can actually connect the mind to a computer now and actually begin to, quote, read thoughts. You can type, you can issue commands, and we can even photograph what you're thinking about. Meaning that, in principle, we can photograph a dream.
Homeland Security's mission isn't benevolent medical devices either. As InfoWars reported 3 years ago, Homeland Security, as part of their so-called anti-terrorism mission, developed a memory transfer system at the University of Southern California. The Pentagon and Homeland Security pretending that their mind control programs are benevolent medical devices, it's just like the thought police and the interrogators from the novel 1984 calling themselves the Ministry of Love. Homeland has a familiar ring to it and a familiar purpose.
Who knows? Maybe we'll upload a vacation you never had.
Or maybe they'll use you as a false flag terrorist. Kaku even referenced Total Recall.
Tell us your fantasy. We'll give you the memory. You want to be a crime fighter, or a world-class athlete, or a secret agent. Yeah. Happy trails, man.
What happens if our criminal justice system comes up against the fact that memories, eyewitness accounts, cannot be trusted anymore?
Finally, Kaku talked about another aspect of brain control besides selectively removing memories or implanting new fictional memories. InfoWars has been covering for a long time the dream of Ray Kurzweil, now director of engineering at Google, and of others, that they will transfer their consciousness into machines, that they will merge with machines in what they call the singularity.
So, Professor, are we going to be able to live forever, store memories?
Well, President Barack Obama and the European Union are going to dump $1 billion, that's billion with a B, not an M, to the Brain Project so that we're going to create basically a disk with all your neural patterns, maybe your memories and thoughts and desires on it. The short-term goal is to cure mental illness, one of the great scourges of the human race. But long-term, if you die, in some sense, your genome and your connectome will live on forever.
The real singularity is the merging of global corporations with global government in order to enslave you.
We've already seen a huge upswing in prosperity because of the IT revolution. The kind of things that you're talking about, though, sound like they could expand our economy, improve our lives.
They see you as lab rats. They will offer you some temporary beneficial benefits in order to get you to accept their brain and memory technology. But it will be the instruments of your enslavement.